Hi guys, I'm Charlie Book Fanatic. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to do a February and March wrap up. Because I've read so little in the month of February, I've only read 4 books. I didn't do a February wrap up because I thought I wouldn't read a lot in March, and I've read quite a bit in March, so apparently this wrap up is still going to be quite big. But it doesn't matter because you will still hear all of my opinions on all of these books, and I can say I've had a good 2 reading months. The first book I want to talk about quite shortly is Honest Night by Rachel Bach. This is the second book in the Paradox trilogy, and this is an adult science fiction series. First book follows a woman that takes this dangerous job on a spaceship because she wants to work her way up through the ranks, and the only way to add something else to her resume is basically to take this job on this spaceship, and she basically becomes a surveillance officer on this spaceship. But she's kept quite in the dark, and she's fine with it at first, but eventually gets darker and darker, and she needs to know what is actually going on. So I've read the second book in that series, and I rated it 3 stars. I thought this was quite a fun installment in this trilogy. There basically was never a dull moment in this book. I felt entertained the whole time. I was never bored. I especially like the characters in this series, and we got to know a lot more about them in this second book. But it's not the characters that make me come back for more. It's more the plot that really makes me want to read this series. At this point, I have no clue how they are going to fix all of the problems they have built up so far, and I'm super interested to find out in the third and final installment in this series how everything is going to tie up. Everyone in this series is morally ambiguous, and if there's something I like in books, it is morally ambiguous characters. I didn't like how shifty Debbie, the main character, was. She was constantly changing alliances and then thinking this person was the one she wanted to stand with, and then the other person, and they were basically these opinions that stand completely opposite each other, and I wasn't sure why she was constantly being so doubtful, and I was quite annoyed with it, to be honest. I'm also not a fan of the love story in this series. I don't get how they fell in love with each other. I don't feel the chemistry, the romantic tension, anything, and I really hope the romance keeps being set on the back burner, because I am more interested in the plot than I am in the love story. And lastly, I really hate the covers for this trilogy. I don't know why, they just feel sort of cliche. This second book in the series has the best cover out of the trilogy, I'd have to say, but then I look at the next book, and the next book has a yellow cover, and I was basically disgusted by it. Why is it yellow? The second book I read was New York Nights by Duggan. It's the second book in the Heart of the City trilogy. This is a new adult contemporary romance series. And Duggan is basically one of my favorite authors. All of these books follow different characters. The characters don't pop up in the next book. They just follow these different characters in different cities. The first book followed a character who went on vacation to Paris, and the second book followed a character who became an au pair for someone in New York. But all of the characters come from Australia, which is where Duggan is originally from herself. And I only rated this book 2 stars. I'm not a huge fan of this series. I love this Duggan Summer series and her Paradise duology, but so far I'm not a huge fan of her other books. There were some little things that annoyed me, like the main character calling the daughter of her employer Gracie instead of Grace, which was her name, like every single time, and it just annoyed me because the baby, like she's the au pair for this baby. She was calling her Gracie every time. Well, she didn't even know the damn child. Again, I felt no chemistry between the love interest and the main character. It just all felt very awkward. Like, the love interest is her employer, basically, and I didn't see it, I didn't feel it, which is sad. But there were excellent sex scenes in this book. Like always, Duggan really knows how to write his sex scenes, and it's basically what I keep coming back for. Then I read a very sad book, which is Columbine by Dave Cullen. This is an adult non-fiction story about a Columbine high school shooting, and I rated this book 4 stars. I thought it was super interesting, but since then I've heard a couple of things like that Dave Cullen can't really be trusted and some other shady things about him, so I'm not exactly sure. I've never read anything else about Columbine. This is my only resource, so I can't really say if this is accurate or not, but I did feel like Cullen kind of put his own opinion into it, and I didn't feel like he needed to do that because he wasn't really a part of it. He was just a journalist writing a non-fiction book. But I do have to say that I found this very interesting, and I've learned a lot about what went on during the high school shooting and what exactly happened, and about the perpetrators and the victims, and I feel like I learned a lot. It was a while since I was actually excited to go back to a book and read, but this one really kept me coming back and made me want to read more and more and know more about this tragic story. I also love how the focus of this book was mostly on the killers and what drove them to eventually do this actual high school shooting. Why this book is shady is Cullen said that the perpetrators weren't bullied and they weren't really outcast, but when I read online about other people talking about this, they say that they were severely bullied and were kind of outcasts. So I feel like that was important to mention in the book if that was the case, because I feel like it doesn't really change anything, but it makes you look somewhat differently at this whole story. Like, the intention behind the high school shooting suddenly becomes something completely different than these people just being plain psychopaths. Also in February, I managed to read the 4th book in the Throne of Glass series, which is Queen of Shadows. And I rated this one 3.5 stars. So I'd say this was one of my favorite books in the series so far. My favorite still being the 1st book, Throne of Glass. But I don't completely hate the series anymore, even though I'm still very annoyed at times. But I did add the 5th book to my TBR, and I am going to read it. I'm so far into the series already, I need to know what happens next. Selena's growth throughout the series has been tremendous, and I feel like I need to point that out because that is the best aspect of this whole series for me so far, as well as Manon Blackbeard, who was introduced in the 3rd book. I still think she's my favourite character, but I'm very curious as to what is going to happen in the next book, because some of the villains that were in the series up until now aren't in the picture anymore. This was the 1st book I felt like wasn't a filler book since the 1st book in the series, because I just felt like nothing was happening. The story was super slow paced, and with this book it was faster paced. Things were actually happening, and the 2nd and 3rd book just felt like build up to the 4th book, and I really didn't like that. What I really hate about this series is how every single male character in this series has to be so territorial and so protective over Selena. She was a damn assassin. She can take care of herself. Please back off now. I also don't ship anyone with anyone anymore, because honestly, every ship has been destroyed so far, and I just don't like anyone with anyone. But having read ACOTAR, this series is the lesser one in my opinion, so that is probably why I would rate it lower than ACOTAR with basically every single book, because it will always be the lesser series. Then I read a science fiction anthology called Invisible Planets. It was edited by Ken Liu, and it is full of Chinese science fiction short stories by female and male authors. And my overall rating for this collection was 3 stars, but I can be more specific about this rating because I did rate every single short story in this, and I wasn't a huge fan of it, honestly. Yeah, I rounded it up from 2.87 stars to 3 stars, because honestly, I didn't like a lot of stories in this book. They were too abstract, too weird for me, and some stories I really, really liked, but there were less of them than there were of stories I disliked. But there were a couple ideas in this collection that I was like, ooh, that is actually a really clever idea for a story. Then I reread the 2nd book in the summer series by CJ Duggan, The Endless Summer, because I'm just such a huge fan of this series. And I rated this one, again, 4 stars. I enjoy this series so much. It's basically a series set in Australia, and it follows this group of friends, and they get older throughout the books, and each book follows a different couple, but all the side characters are the same characters from the other books, and it's really great. It's very relatable. The romances are actually good. Only the covers are super cheesy, but I adore this series and I won't ever stop talking about it because I'm so glad I discovered it back in 2015. Then I also managed to read a new YA contemporary standalone release, which is A List of Cages by Robin Rowe. This follows a character who goes to high school and finds out that his little foster brother, who isn't his foster brother anymore, is going to the same high school, and he tries to reconnect with him and find out what eventually happened to him. And this was a very sad book, and I didn't expect it to get as dramatic as it did. I did rate it 3 stars because it disappointed me. I expected more from it, especially from the ADHD aspect of it. Like, the main character's ADHD, and I have ADHD, and I didn't feel like it was represented well. This was written by someone who does not have ADHD herself, but she was a special education teacher, and I do feel like that explains a bit, because she doesn't have ADHD herself. She will never fully understand what it is like, and I feel like she focused too much on the hyperactivity of the body than on the hyperactivity inside the mind and just other aspects of ADHD. I did really like the main character Adam in this book though. I felt like he was a truly likable character. I also did not expect the story to go as dark as it went, being a YA contemporary, but it went some places, and it had huge shock value for me because I honestly did not expect it to be as tragic and as devastating as it was. Although it did not get me emotional, and I get that it should have made me emotional, but it just didn't touch me, and I feel like I have a heart of stone because I did not cry one single tear at this book. Then I got to an e-arc I requested from Edelweiss, and that is Radio Silence by Alice Oseman. This is about a boy and a girl who get to know each other in school, and this boy is the creator of this podcast that this girl has been listening to for years, and she becomes the creator, like the art creator for this podcast. They start working together, becoming best friends. But the cool thing about this whole story is the diversity. Like, the female main character is biracial. She is English Ethiopian, and she is also bisexual. And then there is also male main character. I think he is gay. He definitely falls in love with boys, but I don't know for sure if he likes girls as well. Anyway, there is loads of diversity in this, and I love that about it. But for the overall rating of this, I only gave this 3 stars, and it wasn't as good as I expected it to be. I picked this book up in the first place for 1, the diversity, and 2, the premise of it, because I've never read about a podcast before, and I thought the podcast premise was so interesting and so well thought out. Tumblr was also a huge part of this book, and I really liked how that was incorporated into it all. I also love the message of this book, that college is not the answer to everything. Like, these characters in this book have been working toward college all their lives. They are really good students, but this book really put out the message that college is not for everyone, and it doesn't have to be, and while not discouraging going to college, and I really like that. Also, the female main character's mom, she literally was the mom. I would love to have a mom like that. Like, she was so cool. She was basically the female main character's best friend, but she also knew when to be a mom. I was not a fan of the way this book was written though. Like, when someone would laugh, the author would literally write ha dash ha. And if this was a chat conversation, maybe, but it wasn't. These people were talking to each other in real life. They were sitting in the car together, and the author would write ha dash ha. Please just say they laughed and not write it out. What I didn't like was that the male main character's mom was basically the villain of the story. Obviously, she can be the villain of the story, but I feel like she should have been a bit more fleshed out, and she should have gotten some good traits and not just being overall bad. Also, with animal cruelty in this book, so trigger warning for that. It doesn't go into detail, but it is there, and some people really can't stand reading about animal cruelty. I really don't like animal cruelty, so if you don't like animal cruelty being used as a plot device, I would not recommend this book to you. Then I finally managed to finish Jane Eyre by Charlotte Brontë. I've been reading this book since the beginning of February, and I only just finished it like the 23rd of March. It's fucking crazy, like, honestly. This book took me so long, but don't blame me, because this book is over 500 pages, and it's a classic. So I read through classics so slowly because they are written in a different way than the contemporary novel is written, because they were obviously written in like the 1800s, and it took me a damn long time. That doesn't mean I didn't enjoy this though, because I did. Jane Eyre, it follows this woman called Jane Eyre, and she becomes an au pair. I have something with au pairs and premises apparently, but she becomes an au pair or a governess to this girl, to this little girl that is being taken care of by the master of the house, called Mr. Rochester. And basically this whole story is the love story of Mr. Rochester and Jane Eyre, but a lot happens. Like, a lot happens. And I really like how it was also sort of a thriller. Like, there was some mystery aspects added in this. And I really did not expect it because obviously I have read all of Jane Austen's novels and they are very plain. I really like them, but they're very plain. And this one had just so much added into it, which I'm not going to say because spoilers. But honestly, I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoy comparing Jane Austen's works with Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre because it is so different in so many ways. Then it ends with Us by Colleen Hoover. And so many people, this is a recent release, and so many people have been raving about this. Like, it has over a 4.0 average rating on Goodreads, but I only gave it 2 stars. Why? Because I despise this book in every single way. And I don't know if I should go into detail too much in this, but I hated the way this was written. This is about an abusive relationship. The main character's mother was in a physically abusive relationship with her father. And the main character gets into a physically abusive relationship herself. Like, she's not the abuser, but she gets into a physically abusive relationship with her boyfriend. I don't get it. I don't get how this could happen. All of it was way too coincidental. So the main character opened up a flower shop and this woman came into the flower shop and she wanted to volunteer to work there. She was a rich woman and she had too much time on her hands and she just wanted to help the main character. Nobody does it in real life. But then it turns out that the love interest, who the main character has met earlier, a couple months earlier, turns out to be this woman's brother. What are the chances? What are the chances? For a contemporary novel, I feel like it has to be realistic. This doesn't happen. It just doesn't. And that annoyed me to no end. I also just don't get, like, I would have liked this a lot more if the main character didn't have a mother who got into a physically abusive relationship and then goes and justifies her boyfriend's actions towards herself. Like, what are you doing? I don't get it. I don't get how you can watch your mother being beaten up and then being beaten up yourself and thinking like, oh, he's completely different. He just pushed me down the stairs, but he isn't like my dad at all. Like, he didn't mean to do it. It's better that I left that book for last because honestly, I'm so riled up right now. These were all of the books I read in February and March. Let me know down below if you've read any of these books, if you agree or disagree with me, and what you read in March. I would love to know. Thank you for watching. Goodbye!